The alien classroom buzzed with strange sounds, clicks, hums, and whispers that echoed off the silver walls. The students came from a dozen different planets, each with their own language, color, and smell. Some had glowing skin, some floated instead of walking, some didn't even breathe air, and in the last row, sitting awkwardly on a small metal chair, was the only human, a young man named Ethan Cole. Ethan felt out of place like a lone candle in a sea of cold stars. He had joined the Galactic Engineering Academy, the most advanced school in the Orion sector. Getting accepted was nearly impossible, especially for a human from a small blue planet still learning interstellar travel. But Ethan had earned his place, barely. Still, the aliens didn't respect him. They called him primitive. They laughed at his old-fashioned tools and short lifespan. They whispered that humans were clever but weak. Today, Ethan was about to prove them wrong or fail in front of the entire galaxy. The announcement, the classroom lights dimmed, and a tall alien floated in, a being of soft green energy wrapped in silver armor. His name was Professor Xyrix, one of the oldest minds in the galaxy. He had built starships before most species had discovered fire. His voice echoed in every mind at once. "Students, today begins your final challenge." A murmur spread through the class. The final challenge was famous. It decided who would graduate and who would be forgotten. Xyrix raised one glowing arm. "Your task is simple. Build a shelter that can protect life on an uninhabitable world." Gasps rippled through the room. Even alien students who had 4 brains looked worried. "You will each be transported to a dead moon," Xyrix continued. "There you will find junk, scrap metal, broken parts, alien debris. Nothing more. You must survive 1 full rotation. Build a shelter from what you find. The environment will test your mind, your body, and your courage." Then his glowing eyes turned toward Ethan. "And yes, human, you will compete as well." A wave of laughter filled the air. One alien student, a scaled creature named Rakar, sneered. "Maybe the human can build a treehouse from sand." The class erupted in cruel laughter. Ethan clenched his fist but said nothing. He met Rakar's eyes with quiet determination. The drop within hours. Each student was placed in a small pod and launched toward different points on the dead moon Epsilon 9. The surface was frozen, covered in gray dust and filled with dangerous radiation. The sky was always dark. There was no sound, only the endless howl of wind. When Ethan's pod landed, the door hissed open, letting in cold air that bit his skin like knives. He stepped out, wearing a thin survival suit and holding a basic scanner. "Temperature, 120 degrees, the scanner said. "Radiation, moderate. Wind speed, 60 kilometers per hour. Ethan looked around. The land was empty except for broken alien machines and piles of metal trash. Pieces of ancient ships were half buried in the dust. Other students would have advanced equipment. Robots, plasma tools, energy fabricators. But Ethan's pod had only a few old tools, a heat sensor and a small welding torch. He laughed bitterly. A human with a screwdriver against aliens with supercomputers. Great odds, but quitting wasn't an option. He took a deep breath, looked up at the dim red sun and started walking. The discovery after hours of searching, Ethan found something. An old alien reactor half buried under a crashed shuttle. The shell was cracked, the wires frozen, but the power core inside still glowed faintly. He knelt beside it, eyes wide. "You're alive. Just barely. If he could fix it, it could become a heat source, maybe even power his shelter. But the components were alien, nothing like human machines. The designs looked like they had been written by a spider with a laser pen. Still, Ethan smiled. Doesn't matter. Energy is energy." He began to work using scrap metal and wiring from the junk piles. His gloves tore, his fingers bled, but he kept going. Sparks flew into the cold air as he welded 2 plates together. The night sky of Epsilon 9 was silent except for the crackle of his torch and the sound of his breathing. Hours passed. Then suddenly, whirr, click. The small reactor came to life, glowing like a heartbeat in the dark. Ethan sat back, exhausted but smiling. "One spark at a time," he whispered. "That's how humans survive." The watchers far above the moon in a hovering observation ship, Professor Xyrix and his assistants watched the students' progress through floating holograms. Most aliens had already built strong shelters, domes of crystal, energy bubbles, or plasma tents. They had resources and knowledge far beyond Ethan's. But Xerix's eyes focused on one screen: the humans. He watched as Ethan used scrap and alien junk to form a small structure around the glowing core, shaping metal panels into walls. No computers, no guidance, just raw skill and instinct. Interesting, Xerix murmured. He does not rely on technology. He feels it, one of the assistants scoffed. He's wasting time. His shelter will collapse in hours. Xerix didn't reply. He simply smiled, the way a scientist smiles before an unexpected discovery. The nightfall. The temperature dropped again as the red sun vanished behind the horizon. The wind turned violent, carrying icy dust that cut like glass. Ethan's small metal walls shook under the pressure. Inside, the power core flickered weakly. Ethan tightened his jacket, shivering. Not giving up now. He added more scrap around the core, trying to trap the heat. Then an idea struck him. A wild human idea. He remembered Earth's old heating systems. How early humans used rocks and sand to store warmth. Quickly he piled dusty alien minerals near the glowing core, forming a ring. The minerals began to absorb heat and slowly released it into the air. Minutes later, the temperature rose. The cabin walls stopped shaking. For the first time, Ethan smiled and whispered, "Self-heating." From junk above, Xerix watched in silence. He knew this was no accident. This was innovation born from desperation. The human had just turned garbage into survival, and this was only the beginning. The night on Epsilon 9 was colder than anything Ethan had ever imagined. The wind howled through the cracks of his metal walls, but inside the small cabin it was warm, almost cozy. The glowing reactor core hummed softly, surrounded by rings of dusty minerals that absorbed and released heat. His breath no longer froze in the air. The warmth felt like victory. Ethan sat on the floor watching the flickering light dance across the jagged metal panels. He smiled to himself, whispering, "Not bad for human junk." His hands were sore, his face covered in gray dust, but his heart was steady. He had built something no one thought he could. A shelter that lived and breathed warmth in the middle of a frozen death world. High above, in the floating observation ship, Professor Xerix watched the humans' progress closely. The other students had completed their shelters hours ago. Most of them had elegant structures, energy domes, plasma shells, shimmering spheres that pulsed with alien brilliance. Yet none of them showed life. They were perfect but cold, functional but lifeless. Only one shelter glowed with warmth like a beating heart. The humans. "Fascinating," Xerix murmured. His assistants didn't share his interest. "He used garbage," one scoffed. "It's a heat trap, nothing more. When the radiation storm hits, it'll melt down." Xerix didn't answer. His glowing eyes narrowed. Let us see if the human understands survival. Or just luck. Down below, Ethan had no idea he was being watched. He was too busy reinforcing the roof. He'd found a large curved panel from a crashed drone and dragged it across the dust. Every step felt heavier. The air was thin and each breath burned his throat. Still, he pushed on. Humans, he thought, weren't made to quit. By the time he secured the panel, his fingers were numb. He rested, staring at the dark horizon. The alien moons hung like silent ghosts above him. For a moment, he wondered if anyone back on Earth would ever hear about this. About a single human building warmth in a dead world. He shook his head and laughed softly. They probably wouldn't believe it. A sudden flash cut across the sky. A meteor storm. Bright streaks of blue light falling toward the ground. Ethan's eyes widened. He ducked back into his cabin just before the first impact. The explosions came one after another, sending tremors through the ground. Dust filled the air. His shelter groaned and shuddered. He pressed his body against the wall, whispering, "Hold together." "Come on, hold." The impacts faded after several minutes, but the noise didn't stop. Something was moving outside, something big. He peeked through a small crack in the wall and froze. A massive alien creature, like a mix between a crab and a machine, was crawling toward his cabin. Its body glowed faintly from the radiation storm. It wasn't alive in the normal sense. It looked half mechanical, half biological. Ethan's heart pounded. The creature raised one of its legs and slammed it into the ground. The shockwave made his cabin tremble. He grabbed a metal rod, the closest thing he had to a weapon. "I just built this thing," he muttered. "You're not tearing it down already." The creature sniffed the air, or whatever its version of sniffing was, and turned toward the reactor's faint glow. It began to scrape the ground, moving closer. Ethan didn't think. He rushed outside, shouting and waving his arms. The cold bit into his skin immediately. "Hey, over here!" he yelled. The creature paused, its glowing eyes shifting toward him. For a moment they stared at each other, human and alien beast, both survivors of different worlds. Then the creature lunged. Ethan dodged, rolling into the dust as its leg crashed down where he'd been standing. He scrambled to his feet and grabbed a long metal pipe from the debris. As the creature swung again, he jabbed the pipe into one of its joints. Sparks burst out and the creature screamed in a metallic roar. Pain shot through Ethan's arm, but he held on, pushing with everything he had. The pipe snapped. The creature staggered back, hissing, and then turned, slowly limping away into the darkness. Ethan stood there shaking, his breath ragged. He was still alive, barely. Inside the observation ship, Xyrix leaned forward. "He fought it off?" one of the assistants said in disbelief. "With a stick." Xyrix smiled faintly. "With will." Ethan returned to the cabin, sealing the cracks with more scrap metal. His hands shook as he worked, but he didn't stop. He fixed the damage, strengthened the walls, and checked the reactor. The heat had dropped a little, but it still glowed strong. He whispered, "You and me, buddy. We're not done yet." Hours passed. The storm calmed. The horizon turned pale as the dim sun rose again. Ethan sat beside the core, exhausted but alive. The warmth filled the small space like a heartbeat. He closed his eyes, hearing the hum of his machine. That's when the cabin door opened with a hiss. A tall shadow stepped inside, a holographic projection of Professor Xyrix himself. His silver form shimmered in the air. Ethan jumped to his feet, startled. "Relax, human," the professor said, his voice echoing softly. "The challenge continues, but I am intrigued." He looked around the small space, his eyes scanning the metal, the minerals, the glowing reactor. "You have created something unexpected. Tell me, why build this way?" Ethan hesitated. "Because I had nothing else," he said. "No advanced tools, no alien tech, just junk. So I used what I had. Humans, we improvise." Xyrix's glow flickered slightly, almost like amusement. "Improvise," he repeated. "You adapt to what others throw away." Ethan nodded. "That's how we've always survived." The hologram studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Survival is an art. Human. And you may be an artist after all." Before Ethan could reply, the image vanished. He stood alone again, staring at the space where Xyrix had been. Outside, the alien sky began to shift colors, turning crimson. Something new was coming, a test greater than before. Ethan didn't know what awaited him next. But one thing was certain. He wasn't just building a shelter anymore. He was building proof that a human could stand against the galaxy itself. And this time everyone was watching. The second sunrise on Epsilon 9 was dim and eerie. The faint red light crawled over the gray dust, painting long shadows across the wreckage. Ethan woke to the low hum of his reactor. The air inside the cabin was still warm, but the silence outside felt heavier than before. He stretched his sore arms and whispered, "Still alive." Then he smiled. "Take that, Rakar." He stepped outside, scanning the horizon. The land was scattered with metallic fragments that shimmered faintly in the pale light. The wind had calmed, but in the distance he could see movement, bright lights and energy domes. The other students had built entire fortresses overnight. One looked like a glass bubble floating above the ground. Another was a perfect cube glowing with plasma shields. Ethan's shelter looked tiny compared to theirs, just a patchwork of junk metal barely holding together. He didn't care. His cabin was alive. It breathed warmth. It had saved him. Back in orbit, the alien students gathered in the observation hall to review their progress. Holographic screens showed everyone's shelters. Rakar, the scaled alien who loved to mock humans, grinned proudly. His shelter was a masterpiece. Sharp, elegant, and completely powered by antimatter cells. "Perfection," he said smugly. "The human should just give up. His pile of trash will melt when the radiation storm comes." But when his screen showed Ethan's cabin, there was an odd silence. The human's shelter glowed faintly, its warmth visible even from orbit. The sensors showed stable temperature levels, steady radiation protection, and oxygen concentration within safe limits. No student had achieved all three with scrap materials. Professor Xyrix floated into the room, his silver armor shining under the lights. "Observe carefully," he said. While others built for beauty, one built for survival. Rakar's grin faded. He cheated. He must have found working tech. Xyrix turned his glowing eyes toward him. Would you like to verify that? Rekar hesitated. Yes. I want to see for myself, the professor nodded. Then you will. The next phase begins now. Down on Epsilon 9, Ethan heard a sharp crack in the air. A small pod descended from the sky, landing with a hiss of steam. He tensed, picking up his metal rod again. The pod door opened and Rekar stepped out, his silver scales gleaming under the red sun. Well, Rekar hissed. The famous human engineer, Ethan sighed. Oh, it's you. I was hoping for more junk to recycle. Rekar's jaw tightened. You mock me? You think you've won because you built a heater out of trash? I didn't build it to win, Ethan said calmly. I built it to survive. Rekar circled the small cabin, inspecting every inch. He touched the walls, scanned the core, then looked at Ethan with disbelief. You really made this from debris. No advanced materials, no power cells. That's right. Rekar stared for a moment longer, then smirked. Impressive, but useless. Let's see if it can survive this. He raised his arm and a small device on his wrist flashed. Instantly, the ground shook. A cloud of energy burst from the distance, rolling toward them like a storm of light. Ethan's eyes widened. What did you do? Triggered a heat surge, Rekar said coldly. To test your little invention. The wave hit seconds later. The ground boiled. Metal shards turned red hot. Ethan ran inside, sealing the door behind him. The walls vibrated as the heat pressed in. The reactor core flickered. For a moment, he thought everything would melt. Then something strange happened. The minerals around the reactor glowed brighter, absorbing the heat faster than before. The cabin temperature stabilized. The junk walls reflected the heat outward instead of inward. The structure didn't collapse, it adapted. Outside, Rekar shielded his face as the wave passed. When the light faded, Ethan's cabin still stood, smoke rising gently from its edges. Rekar's jaw dropped. Impossible. Ethan stepped out, coughing, covered in soot but grinning. You just made it stronger. Above, Xyrix watched silently, the corners of his mouth curling in what could almost be a smile. He doesn't react, the professor said softly. He evolves, Rekar's pride cracked. He looked at Ethan, his scales rippling in frustration. You think this means anything? You're still just human. Weak, temporary. Ethan wiped sweat from his face. Maybe. But humans don't need to live forever to make something that lasts. Rekar glared at him, then stormed back to his pod. Before leaving, he turned and said, Next phase, human. The challenge is no longer survival. It's endurance. Let's see how long your junk can last when the storms turn real. The pod blasted off into the gray sky. Ethan watched it disappear, then turned back toward his cabin. His muscles ached, his body screamed for rest, but his mind was burning with new ideas. He began to collect more metal fragments, thinking of ways to reinforce the structure. He wanted to make it better, stronger, smarter. If Rekar was planning another test, Ethan would be ready. As he worked, he noticed something odd near the reactor. The minerals he'd placed earlier had changed color. They weren't just storing heat anymore, they were producing it. Slowly, continuously, even when the reactor dimmed. Ethan touched one of the stones carefully. It pulsed faintly like a tiny living heart. What are you? He whispered. The mineral shimmered in response, as if listening. He realized the radiation and heat surge must have altered their structure. The junk he'd used wasn't just random metal. It was alien tech with unknown properties. His makeshift invention had accidentally created a self-sustaining heat system. A discovery born from chaos. Above the moon, Professor Xyrix watched the readings and frowned in wonder. He doesn't even know it yet, he murmured. But the human has just rediscovered a lost form of thermic synthesis. Something our kind abandoned centuries ago. Ethan didn't hear any of that. He was too busy sketching in the dust, drawing new shapes, new designs. His mind raced with possibilities. If he could link more minerals, he could make the heat spread evenly. Maybe even power lights or machines. The junk around him wasn't just survival material anymore. It was the start of something bigger. As the red sun dipped again below the horizon, his cabin glowed like a small star in the endless gray. From orbit, every alien could see it, the single point of warmth in a dead world. And deep inside, Ethan Cole, the lone human, smiled through exhaustion. He didn't realize it yet, but the challenge was no longer just a test. It was the beginning of a revolution. Somewhere far above, Xyrix whispered to himself, The galaxy has forgotten the fire of creation. But the human, he remembers. The wind outside began to howl again, carrying with it the promise of a storm greater than before. Ethan stood at the door of his glowing cabin, looking into the distance. Whatever came next, he was ready. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was changing the rules. The third night on Epsilon 9 began with silence, but it was not peaceful. The sky above the dead moon shimmered with faint green light, like ghosts dancing in the thin air. Ethan lay awake inside his glowing cabin, listening to the steady hum of the self-heating core. Every few seconds, the walls creaked under the cold. The warmth still held, but something in the air felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. His head ached from lack of sleep. The heat stones he'd discovered continued to glow softly, spreading gentle warmth through the small shelter. They pulsed in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. "Still going strong," he whispered, tapping the metal wall. "You and me, old friend." Outside, frost glittered across the junk field. But beneath that frozen beauty, shadows moved. Ethan didn't see them. Yet. Up in the orbiting observation ship, the alien students gathered once more in the viewing hall. They had all passed the first survival phase, but something about the humans' progress bothered them. Each student's holographic shelter flickered on screen. Most had powered down to conserve energy. Only one glowed brighter than ever. "The human structure has stabilized beyond expectation," said an assistant. "His heat output is self-sustaining." Rakar crossed his arms, tail twitching in anger. "Impossible. His junk shouldn't last another cycle." Professor Xyrix watched silently. The data confirmed what he suspected. Ethan's improvised reactor had become a new form of thermic life. Energy was regenerating in cycles like breathing. "He has achieved continuous equilibrium," Xyrix murmured. Without design, without calculation, only instinct. The room fell silent. The alien students didn't like that word. Instinct was something primitive species relied on. Yet the humans' instincts had outperformed their advanced machines. Rakar's pride cracked again. "Permission to interact," he said. "He's cheating the simulation somehow." "I'll prove it." Xyrix turned his glowing eyes toward him. "Very well. But remember, student, every interference has a cost." Rakar smirked. "Then I'll make sure the cost is his." Moments later, Rakar and two of his allies were inside stealth pods, descending through the gray clouds toward the moon's surface. Ethan, unaware of their approach, stepped outside his cabin to collect more materials. The red sun was rising weakly. The wind had softened. He walked across the dust, humming to himself, searching for metal scraps. Then he froze. His footprints weren't the only ones. 3 trails cut through the dust, circling his cabin like predators stalking prey. He crouched, his breath fogging his visor. "So, I'm not alone anymore." He turned and saw a flicker of movement behind a broken shuttle, a shimmer in the air, then nothing. Cloaking tech, he thought. The aliens had come. Ethan ran back toward the cabin, but a sharp flash of light stopped him. Rakar decloaked a few meters away, scales shining like knives. Behind him, 2 other alien students appeared, each holding energy tools. "Still alive, human?" Rakar said with a sneer. "Let's see how long that lasts without your toy." Ethan tightened his grip on a piece of rebar. "You're not supposed to interfere." "This isn't interference," Rakar said, stepping closer. "It's a balance." The first alien aimed his tool at the reactor's heat signature and fired. A pulse of energy struck the cabin, shaking it violently. Sparks burst from the roof. Ethan lunged forward, slamming the rebar into the alien's weapon. The blast misfired, sending the alien tumbling into the dust. Rakar hissed. "Fool, you'll destroy yourself." "Maybe," Ethan shouted, "but at least I'll take you with me." He ducked another energy blast and dove inside the cabin. The core was flickering dangerously now. The minerals pulsed faster, reacting to the outside interference. He could feel the heat rising sharply, too fast. He grabbed the stabilizer rod and jammed it into place, whispering, "Hold together. Come on." Outside, Rakar and the others backed away as steam poured from the seams. "He's going to blow it," one of them shouted. But instead of exploding, the cabin erupted in light. A massive wave of energy rippled outward, throwing the aliens to the ground. When the dust cleared, Ethan's shelter stood untouched, stronger than before. The heat stones glowed brighter than ever, now fused into the metal walls themselves. Ethan stumbled outside, coughing. "Guess you didn't plan for that." Rakar stared in disbelief. His scanners showed something impossible. The human's shelter had adapted again, absorbing the attack and using it to reinforce its structure. It wasn't just surviving now. It was evolving. Back in orbit, Professor Xyrix rose slowly from his seat. His voice was low but filled with awe. He has created a reactive system, something we have not seen in thousands of years. One assistant whispered, "It's alive." Xyrix nodded. In a sense, a living machine bonded to its maker. On the surface, Rakar's fear turned to rage. "You don't deserve this power," he snarled. "You're just a primitive animal." Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. Maybe. But even animals know how to fight back. He picked up a chunk of glowing metal and threw it at Rakar's weapon. The impact sent a burst of feedback through the device, shorting it out. Sparks flew. Rakar screamed as energy crackled across his armor. The two other aliens grabbed him, dragging him back toward their pod. "You'll regret this, human," Rakar shouted as they vanished into the storm. Ethan fell to his knees, breathing heavily. His cabin pulsed softly behind him like it was alive, like it was watching over him. He touched the wall gently. "You protected us, didn't you?" The metal vibrated faintly in response. He laughed quietly, half in disbelief. "You're learning too." High above, Xyrix shut down the observation feed. The assistants exchanged nervous glances. "Should we end the test?" one asked. Xyrix shook his head. "No, the test has ended itself. Now, something greater begins." He looked out at the planet below, his voice almost reverent. "That human just built the first self-adaptive structure in the galaxy. A thinking shelter. The others tried to conquer the environment. He made peace with it. On the moon's surface, Ethan repaired the final cracks, unaware of the storm of curiosity brewing above him. His eyes were heavy, his body weak, but inside he felt something new. Hope. He wasn't just proving humans could survive. He was proving they could create even when the universe gave them nothing. As the red sun dipped again, the cabin's light spread across the frozen wasteland, a warm beacon in the endless gray. The winds whispered softly through the metal, almost like words. Ethan closed his eyes, listening. He didn't understand the language, but he felt it. The shelter was speaking back. He smiled. "Yeah, I hear you." Far above, Professor Xyrix turned to the stars and whispered to himself. "And so it begins." The age of human invention. The alien winds howled again, and deep under the ground, something ancient stirred, something drawn by the warmth Ethan had created. He didn't know it yet, but his invention had just awakened a secret buried for centuries beneath the dead moon, and it was coming for him. The wind carried a strange sound that night, like distant whispers beneath the frozen ground. Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat near the glowing core, staring at the floor as a low vibration pulsed under the metal plates. It wasn't the normal hum of the reactor. This was deeper, older, almost like something alive was moving below. He placed a hand on the wall. "You feel that too, don't you?" he murmured. The heat stones flickered in response, their light dimming and brightening like a slow heartbeat. The vibration grew stronger. Dust began to fall from the ceiling. Outside, the gray desert was trembling. Cracks split open across the frozen ground, releasing faint blue light from below. The air shimmered as energy fields flickered through the atmosphere. Ethan grabbed his helmet and stepped outside. The cold slapped him instantly, but the sight froze him in place. The horizon was glowing, not with sunlight, but with lines of light spreading across the surface like veins. They pulsed, stretching toward his cabin as if the planet itself was waking up. Ethan whispered, "What did I do?" In orbit, alarms echoed through the observation ship. The alien students shouted as their screens filled with static and wild energy readings. Professor Xyrix floated in the center, his glowing form calm but alert. "What's happening?" one assistant cried. "The moon's core is reactivating." "That's impossible. It's been dead for 10,000 years. Xyrix's eyes glowed brighter. "Not dead," he said softly. "Dormant." Until now, he focused the scanner on the human's location. Ethan's small glowing cabin was at the center of the spreading energy. Xyrix whispered, "He didn't just build a shelter. He woke something ancient." Down below, the ground near Ethan split open, revealing a deep tunnel of light. He stumbled backward as chunks of rock and metal fell away. A massive circular symbol glowed beneath the surface like a buried city waking from sleep. The voice of his suit AI crackled in his ear. "Warning, Unknown energy signature. Recommend evacuation immediately. Yeah, Ethan muttered, staring into the glowing abyss. No kidding. He turned to run toward his cabin, but stopped. The walls were shifting. The metal panels fused with the heat stones began to move on their own, sliding into new shapes. The structure was changing again, responding to the energy below. Hey, stop, he shouted, stepping back. But the cabin ignored him. The door sealed shut, and the foundation lifted slightly off the ground. The glow from inside intensified until the entire thing looked like a floating orb of molten metal. Ethan shielded his eyes. You're alive, and you're trying to talk, aren't you? The heat stones pulsed faster, and suddenly a voice, not human, not machine, echoed faintly through the metal. It was like hearing words through water. Energy. Awakening. Linked. Ethan froze. Linked to what? To you. The light flared, and a wave of heat knocked him to the ground. The world spun. When he opened his eyes, he was inside the cabin again, but it was different. The walls were smoother, glowing with flowing patterns of light. The temperature was perfect. The air smelled faintly like ozone. Where am I? He whispered. The voice returned, clearer now. You are inside the structure you created. The energy from this world has joined your design. We are one system now. You're saying the planet connected to the cabin? Yes, the voice said. You woke the ancient core. It recognizes life. It responds to warmth. You brought heat back to a world that had forgotten it. Ethan's heart raced. You mean this moon, it's alive? In a way, the voice said. Its energy was locked beneath the surface for ages. Your creation gave it form again. He sat in silence, trying to process what he was hearing. He had come here to build a shelter. Now he was speaking to a planet. Outside, the alien observers were panicking. Raykar slammed his claws against the console. He's interfering with the experiment. That thing is going to destroy the moon. Xyrix's expression didn't change. No, he said slowly. It's rebuilding it. Indeed, where once the land was gray and dead, faint green patches began to form, tiny crystals growing from the cracks, glowing softly. The energy lines across the ground pulsed in rhythm with the human's creation. It was as if the moon was drawing breath again. Inside, Ethan touched the glowing wall. If you're connected to this planet, can you control it? There was a pause. Not control, the voice said. Balance. Energy moves toward warmth, toward life. Then can you stop it from tearing apart? Another pause. Only with you, Ethan nodded. Then let's do it. He moved to the reactor core and placed his hands on the stabilizer. The moment he touched it, light surged through his body. Images flashed in his mind. Vast alien cities long destroyed. Oceans of crystal. Towers reaching the stars. The beings who had built them looked nothing like humans or Xyrix's kind. They were made of energy and metal, their forms shifting like liquid light. One of the visions showed the same moon, thousands of years ago. Green, full of life. Then something happened. A great freeze, a collapse. The core had gone silent ever since. Until now, Ethan gasped, pulling his hands back. You were waiting for someone warm enough to wake you. Yes, the voice said. You brought the spark. The cabin shook violently as another surge of energy erupted from below. Ethan held onto the core, shouting, "Stay with me!" The walls rippled, stabilizing again. The vibrations slowed. The light dimmed to a steady glow. Outside, the glowing veins across the moon stopped spreading. The energy field stabilized. Silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence. The lifeless world was no longer dead. Xyrix watched the monitors as the readings leveled out. He did it, the professor said in awe. He merged human creativity with ancient technology. Raykar clenched his fists. He's lucky. That's all. No, Xyrix said softly. That is not luck. That is the one thing the galaxy has forgotten. Courage born of warmth. On the surface, Ethan stepped outside again. The air was slightly less biting now. The horizon shimmered with faint green light. His cabin stood steady behind him, glowing softly like a living heart. He looked up at the sky, whispering, "So, what now?" The voice of the cabin spoke once more, quiet and calm. "Now we grow," Ethan smiled tiredly. "Then we'll grow together." Far beneath the ground, the moon's core pulsed again, but this time it wasn't angry. It was breathing. Slowly, the dead world began to change color. What had once been a wasteland was now showing signs of life. And as the first alien sprouts of light rose from the soil, Ethan realized something incredible. He hadn't just built a shelter. He had built the heart of a new world. Above the planet, Xerix whispered to himself, "The human builds warmth where there was none. He is not a student anymore. He is a creator." But deep inside the revived moon, something ancient watched from the dark, awakened by the same spark. It had been waiting for warmth for too long, and now it wanted it back. The ground had stopped shaking, but Ethan could still feel the pulse of the planet beneath his boots. It was faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried under miles of stone. The air no longer felt hostile. For the first time since landing on Epsilon 9, it carried warmth, soft and almost welcoming. But beneath that peace, something new stirred, something he could feel deep inside his chest, whispering through the vibrations. He stood outside the glowing cabin, staring at the faint green light spreading across the horizon. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. The air shimmered as if alive, and for a moment he could hear faint whispers carried on the wind. Voices, not one, but many. They spoke in a language he didn't understand, yet somehow it felt like they were calling his name. Ethan. He turned sharply, eyes scanning the empty landscape. "Who's there?" No answer came, only the faint hum from the ground. He touched his wrist scanner. The readings were unstable. The temperature, radiation, and magnetic fields were all fluctuating. "That's not good," he muttered. "Looks like the planet's having mood swings." Then the voice came again, clear this time and inside his head. "You touched our heart." Ethan froze. His first instinct was to look back at the cabin. The structure pulsed with faint light. "Who are you?" he whispered. "We are the ones who built this world," the voice said, slow and deep, like distant thunder. "You relit the fire we lost." Ethan's mind raced. The ancient beings he had seen in those flashes, they were real. Their energy was still buried beneath this moon. Somehow his invention had awakened their core. "I didn't mean to take anything," he said carefully. "I was just trying to stay alive." "You did not take," the voice replied. "You gave. But warmth attracts hunger." "Hunger?" Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Before he could finish, the ground beneath him cracked open again. He stumbled back as a column of blue light burst upward, forming a giant shape, a swirling mass of energy and shadow. It had no clear form, shifting constantly, like smoke trapped inside lightning. Ethan's heart pounded. "Oh no," the being's voice boomed, shaking the air. "You woke me, small one. You carry the fire I once guarded. Return it." Ethan took a cautious step back. "If I do that, I die. I need this heat to survive." The being tilted its shifting head, the air around it shimmering with power. "Life or death. Both are small words to the stars." "I'm not a star," Ethan said, his voice trembling but firm. "I'm human. We fight for both." The being stared silently, its form flickering. Then, without warning, the ground erupted again. The energy around it surged toward the cabin. The heat stones inside screamed with power. Ethan ran forward, shouting, "No, stop it!" He slammed his hand onto the metal door and the cabin opened. Inside, the walls glowed white-hot. The living structure was fighting back, sending waves of energy outward. It was defending itself and him. "Easy, easy," Ethan yelled. "You'll burn everything." The voice inside his head split into two now. One was the ancient entity demanding its energy back. The other was the cabin itself, calm but firm. "Cabin, we are one." He gave life. Entity, he stole power. Cabin, he shared warmth. Entity, he brings imbalance. Ethan clutched his head, shouting, "Stop it! Both of you!" The pressure was unbearable. His ears rang. The ground around the cabin glowed brighter. He knew if this energy clash continued, the entire moon could tear apart. He took a deep breath. "You both want the same thing," he said aloud. "To live, to feel warmth again." There was silence. Then the deep voice replied, "Explain." Ethan pointed toward the green horizon. "Look around. The heat you're feeling, it's spreading. This world is waking up again. I didn't take your power. I gave it a new home. You can live through it. Through me." The air shimmered as the energy form pulsed, its glow dimming. "Through you?" "Yes," Ethan said, stepping closer. "We don't destroy life. We build it. That's what we do. I didn't just build a shelter, I built a bridge between you and the living. Between what was dead and what can be reborn." The being's voice softened. You speak like a child, but your words carry truth. The light around it flickered. For a moment, the storm calmed. Ethan felt hope rise in his chest until the ground split again, this time with a roar that echoed across the valley. Another shape rose from the fissure, darker and more violent than the first. You cannot share what is ours, it screamed. The first being turned toward it, its glow hardening into a defensive shimmer. Ethan realized what was happening. There's more than one of you. The planet wasn't home to a single intelligence, it was a graveyard of many, all locked together beneath the surface. His awakening of the core had brought them all back, and now they were fighting for control. The sky darkened as the two energy beings collided. The shockwave sent Ethan flying backward. He crashed into the dust, gasping for air. His helmet cracked. The cabin's light grew brighter, spreading tendrils of energy like wings. The structure lifted off the ground slightly as if shielding him. Its voice echoed in his head again. We protect. You created us for this. Ethan struggled to his feet. The two ancient forces slammed into each other, their energy tearing holes through the surface. The land itself began to crack apart. Above, the orbiting ship went silent. The alien students watched in horror as the moon's surface started to fracture. He's going to destroy everything, one shouted. Cyrix's glowing eyes stayed fixed on the scene. No, he's trying to stop destruction. Down below, Ethan ran toward the core of his cabin. He slammed his hands onto the glowing console. Listen to me, he shouted into the storm. This isn't your planet anymore. It's ours now, yours and mine. But only if you stop fighting. The entities paused mid-battle, their energy flickering uncertainly. For a brief second, the entire world went quiet. Ethan could feel their confusion, ancient minds struggling to understand the voice of something so small and fragile. Then, slowly, one of the glowing shapes drifted toward him. Its form dimmed until it was barely visible. You burn bright, little one, it said softly. Perhaps the warmth can be shared. The other entity hesitated, trembling like smoke before a storm. Then it too lowered its light. Together, the two forms sank back into the cracks, merging with the glowing lines beneath the surface. The tremors stopped. The air stilled. The world exhaled. Ethan fell to his knees, trembling. The voice of the cabin whispered gently, "They rest again." He smiled weakly. Good. Let's keep it that way. Far above, Cyrix leaned closer to the screen, his expression unreadable. The human ended a war that began before our species existed, he said quietly. And he did it with words. Rakar said nothing this time. On the moon, Ethan stood again, gazing at the glowing horizon. The world was peaceful, but deep below, faint whispers still stirred, ancient and waiting. The warmth had calmed them. For now. Ethan touched the wall of his cabin, feeling its gentle pulse. We did it, he said softly. But something tells me this isn't over. The metal vibrated in response, like a quiet heartbeat. And somewhere in the shadows beneath the reborn soil, unseen eyes opened once more, watching the human who had dared to steal fire from the stars. The horizon of Epsilon 9 shimmered under a strange dawn. The light wasn't red anymore. It was gold, glowing softly over the gray plains like a new sunrise on an ancient world. Ethan stood outside his living cabin, his breath fogging slightly in the air. The cold was fading. The once dead wind now carried warmth. It almost felt like spring. He had survived storms, alien sabotage, and the wrath of forgotten gods. The planet's pulse had calmed, its buried voices silent for now. But deep inside, Ethan could feel it, the quiet tension before something bigger. Every instinct screamed that it wasn't over. The cabin pulsed faintly beside him, its glow reflecting on his tired face. You feel it too, don't you? He whispered. Yes, the soft voice of the cabin replied. They are not gone. Only listening, Ethan sighed, gazing up at the pale sky. Guess they're deciding whether to crush me or thank me. Far above, in orbit, the observation deck buzzed with nervous energy. The alien students had stopped mocking the human long ago. Now they watched in silence. Rakar's arrogance was gone, replaced by unease. He's still alive, he muttered. Professor Xerix stood motionless, glowing eyes fixed on the screens. Alive, he said quietly, and rewriting the laws of this galaxy. The moon below pulsed once more, sending a signal strong enough to make every instrument on the ship flicker. The assistants rushed to control the readings. Professor, The core is shifting again. Cyrix tilted his head. No. It's communicating. Back on the surface, Ethan felt the ground tremble under his feet. Not violently this time, soft like a heartbeat. Then a circle of light appeared in the dust in front of him. The air shimmered, and from it rose a figure. Not a monster, not a shadow this time, but something. Beautiful. It was made of flowing energy and faintly human shape, transparent and glowing from within. His face was calm, ancient eyes filled with sadness. Ethan Cole, the figure said, its voice deep yet kind. You have reawakened the memory of our world. Ethan froze. You're the one who spoke to me before. The figure nodded. We are many minds joined in one. We built Epsilon 9 as a cradle of creation, but when war came, we buried our hearts beneath the ice to protect the fire of life. Until you returned it, Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't mean to wake anyone, I just didn't want to freeze to death. That is what makes you worthy, the being said gently. You acted not for conquest, but for survival. You brought warmth without demand. Ethan looked down at his cabin. So what happens now? You take your power back? The being's eyes glowed brighter. The energy you call power was never ours to keep. It belongs to any who cherish life. But there is danger. The fire you rekindled cannot stay here, it will spread. If left uncontrolled, it will awaken other sleeping worlds, and not all of them will welcome it. So you're saying I started something I can't stop? Ethan said grimly. Yes. But you can guide it. He frowned. Guide it? I'm just one human. The being stepped closer, its form flickering in the warm light. You are more than that now. The energy bonded with you through your creation. Your mind carries its pattern. You can choose where it goes next. Ethan stared at the glowing ground. If I send it away, what happens to this world? It will return to silence, the being said softly. Peaceful but lifeless once more. And if I keep it here, then the core will continue to grow. It will make this moon alive again, but others will come. They will try to take it, to use it. Ethan felt the weight of both choices pressing on him. Save the planet but risk chaos, or end the miracle he had created. The cabin spoke suddenly, its gentle voice cutting through the silence. We are life now. You cannot erase what already breathes. The being turned toward it, and yet unchecked life burns as easily as it warms. Ethan stepped between them. Enough, both of you. You're talking like this is just data or energy. But it's not. It's life. It's feeling. It's hope. He looked up at the figure. You said I could guide it. Then I'll guide it the human way. Not by erasing it, not by locking it up, but by teaching it balance. The figure tilted its head. Balance? Yeah, Ethan said. Heat and cold. Life and death. Creation and rest. You don't pick one. You learn to live with both. The being was silent for a long moment. Then its form began to shift, growing brighter. Perhaps that is what we forgot. The light expanded, surrounding Ethan. His body trembled as energy flowed through him again. Warmer, calmer this time. He could feel the planet breathing beneath his feet. The fire within the core settled into harmony. In orbit, the alien students gasped as the moon transformed before their eyes. The gray wasteland shimmered with green and gold light. Crystalline plants grew where nothing had lived for ages. Rivers of molten silver flowed gently through the valleys, glowing softly like veins of light. Xerix smiled faintly. He's done it. He balanced creation. Rakar whispered. He turned a dead moon into a living world, with garbage. Xerix turned to him. With heart. Down below, the glowing figure began to fade. You have done what even our kind could not, it said. The warmth is yours to carry now. Wait, Ethan said quickly. You're leaving? We are not leaving, the being replied. We are becoming. Every light you see, every spark of life here, that is us. We will live through the warmth you gave. Ethan's throat tightened. Then, thank you, for trusting me. The figure's light dimmed until only a single golden spark remained. It drifted forward, landing gently in Ethan's palm before sinking into his skin. He gasped as a soft glow spread through his veins, fading after a moment. The connection was complete. The cabin's voice returned, calm and peaceful. The cycle is whole. We are home. Ethan looked around. The planet was quiet, glowing, alive. He whispered. So this is what rebirth feels like. Above, Xerix activated the ship's communicator. Human, his voice echoed in Ethan's helmet. The Council has seen everything. You have changed what we thought possible. Ethan smiled faintly. Guess humans aren't as primitive as they thought, huh? Xyrix chuckled softly. No, you reminded us that progress is not power, it is purpose. As the ship descended toward the surface to retrieve him, Ethan turned one last time to his cabin. Its glow flickered softly like a living heart still beating. I'll come back, he promised quietly. You're part of me now. When he stepped aboard the ship, the alien student stared at him, not with laughter or scorn, but with quiet respect. Even Ricard lowered his head. As the ship rose above Epsilon 9, the newly reborn world shimmered beneath them, glowing rivers, living light, and a single tiny cabin at its heart. Ethan watched it until it vanished into the distance. All that from a pile of junk, he murmured. Xyrix floated beside him. No, he said gently. All that from a spark of humanity. Ethan smiled faintly. Same thing. Far below, the moon pulsed once more, a silent heartbeat echoing across the stars, carrying the warmth of one human's courage into the coldest corners of the galaxy. And in that moment, across worlds that had forgotten what it meant to feel, something ancient stirred again. Hope.